Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Conferences Gone Virtual, How to Take Your Canceled Conference Online with Robert Gelb, CEO of HeySummit. I'm going to let folks have a moment to join us and then we'll get started right away. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. I see folks are still coming onto the webinar, so thank you again. And I know here shortly, folks always ask, will you share the replay on this? And yes, we will. On this one, we probably won't have a deck because Rob and I are just going to have a dialogue related to his experience and expertise. And he has a long history of expertise on taking conferences virtual. So looks like folks are still coming in. Want to say thank you, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. My name is Anissa Avon, and I am the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. And I am here today with Robert Gelb, the CEO of HeySummit. Hello, Rob.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. I know you're in London. Is that right?
Actually, I'm in Edinburgh, in Scotland.
Okay, my bad. Very different.
Actually,
So
I don't have the accent for you.
that's what threw me off. So today we're going to pick Rob's brain around taking your conference virtual. And we're going to have a lot to talk about today and a lot of tips and a lot of strategies for making your conferences successful, even if you've had to change midstream. So to get us started, though, I do want to say thank you to our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we would not have made this summit possible. So I want to say thank you to David Whitmarsh and his team at the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. They are a group of super talented individuals who specialize in multi-channel marketing and human resources information technology consulting. I also want to say thank you to Insperity, HR that makes a difference. Insperity has supplied all of our attendees with a free HR financial analysis report and debrief. And if you've attended another webinar with us in this series, then you know I'm kind of excited about this because it's a much bigger deal than it sounds like. First of all, it'll take our partner over there anywhere from 3 to 10 hours to deliver this. And when I said, are you sure you want to do that? You know, what if we have a lot of people taking advantage of this and they're not a fit for your services? And they said, that's not what this is about. Of course, we're looking to do business, but we also want to support your clients and your peers. And if this is something that can be of service, especially right now during this crazy time of upheaval, when a lot of HR folks are having to throw everything they've worked so hard on out the window, if they can be of service, they said they're all in. So don't hesitate to take advantage of that. It's you can find it at turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. And that is case sensitive. So capital H, capital R, EPORT. All right, my name is Anissa Avon, and I am the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are a full-service learning and development solutions provider providing enterprise solutions. When I went to my team and I said, what are we going to do for our clients? Right now, in-person training and in-person coaching, and even some coaching is not a good fit when people are scrambling. What can we do to help? Well, we have decades of senior level business and executive coaching and training experience with the 1,000+ independent executive coaches and master trainers that are collaborators with us around the country. So we reached out to experts like Rob and said, hey, I think what you do will be of service to our clients and friends. Would you join us for this live summit? And that's how this was born. So do check out, we've got 40+ speakers and counting, and only 28 of those are actually live online right now. So come back to the virtual summit platform at turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/leading in a crisis and see what else is percolating there. Also, we're not going to talk a lot about this right now. I want to jump into our content, but I do want to let you know that also there's 2 very important packages that TurnKey is providing in this time of COVID-19. And one is virtual training specific around managing a newly remote workforce or neuro leadership and employee motivation when you're working with high stress teams, crisis management, business continuity, etc. The other thing that we have put together is a name your own price, NYOP Outplacement Services packages. Unfortunately, we know many of us are furloughing and having to lay off workers, and this is a big deal and a very difficult time. And if we can be of service in supporting your employees that you're having to let go of, and that's something you want more information about, just reach out to me and we can talk more about that. So super excited Rob was able to join us. He never even hesitated. Rob is the CEO of HeySummit, and he, as he puts it, the beautiful virtual summit platform. And I'm just going to tell you, I agree. I've done a lot of webinars in my day, and none of them have ever come together as easily as when I started using the HeySummit platform. He is also the founder of Kendaba, a privacy-conscious social startup for families. He's also been involved in a number of really progressive organizations like Bus 52, which was a nonprofit that featured production of over 100 documentary-style video pieces highlighting people and organizations who were doing great things across America but lacked recognition. So, Rob, tell us a little bit about you and what are we going to learn today?
Well, thanks very much, Anissa. And so, yeah, a little bit about myself. I've been running HeySummit for about a year and a half now. We're still a relatively young company, but my background is in building startups but also managing remote teams, and before then, organizing lots of events. So yeah, I can kind of touch on a bit about all those areas if it's of interest. Recently, though, obviously with the coronavirus outbreak, a lot of event organizers, particularly who maybe don't feel as confident with technology or they don't know what's out there, are understandably really concerned about about being able to deliver events that might have been on the books for years, that are suddenly kind of gone up into smoke. So I'm very happy to just talk about a bit of the mentality that you need to take when thinking about transitioning an in-person event into a virtual event, and also just give some starting points about things you might want to consider when you're looking at whether it's different platforms or different styles or different formats. Happy to kind of talk through any of that kind of stuff.
I think that's perfect. I know from personal experience, many of our clients are having to change their training, either put it off entirely, and in some cases make what was going to be an in-person team rallying event into virtual. And in other cases, folks are having to, as we mentioned earlier, let folks go. And so there's opportunity there to rally the retained leaders and virtually, as well as offer services and support. And I think that your platform and your experience around going virtual is pretty essential.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so let's start with your the most important piece first. If you were to just tell folks the one thing that I would advise you if you're going to go virtual that you need to pay attention to more than any other, give us your best shot.
Well, from an event organization perspective, I think the first thing is just don't panic. Try not to panic. Oftentimes, at least, we've been speaking with literally like hundreds of event organizers that are coming on, and they're panicking and they're really, really worried. And it makes sense. You might have sponsors that you're dealing with. You might have stakeholders. You might have, there's a lot of money that are in events and planning events. Whether or not you're talking about internal training events or external events, there's a lot of stress on an event planner in the best of times, right? When everything's going well. But I would just encourage, if anybody's out there who's thinking about transitioning their whether it's trainings or regular events, try not to panic too much. This is everyone says unprecedented situation. This is a good example, a good opportunity for you to use that kind of language. Everybody else is in the same boat, and oftentimes, at least we see that the best people or the best approaches that people can take is making sure that the communication is clear. The communication is out there, and the way in which you choose to communicate and make a plan, even if it's not perfect, that matters a heck of a lot more than maybe overworrying it and then not taking any action at all. So I would encourage people to just remember that there's a lot of other people that are in the same boat as you. I know that that's sometimes not very helpful, but it also means that there's opportunity here to try and keep the value there and to try and still put something on, and a lot of goodwill around, so that, you know, you don't have to worry about stuff being perfect. So especially, you know, us event organizers, we all want everything to be perfect. And if one thing goes wrong, it's over.
Yeah.
So I try and resist as much as possible thinking like, oh, I need to create some sort of, you know, beautiful virtual reality experience, but I don't know where to start. I would just take a breath, calm down, and think about the value that your event or your training or what have you is bringing, and really focus on that value and the attendee or the customer or the client that you're working with. And usually when you do that, you're able to then think creatively and still deliver that value.
That makes a lot of sense. I have a question about that, but before I do, I just want to say to you folks that are listening, if you have a question, if you have a conference that you're going to take virtual, or you have an internal training event that you're looking on taking virtual or changing it to all virtual, or even if you've experienced virtual training and have some hiccups that you've experienced and you want to know how to correct those, I suspect Rob will have some advice for us from probably hard-won experience, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we've hosted about 2,000 summits, conferences on our platform, so we've seen it all.
That's amazing.
And just on that, I think that no matter how perfectly you plan stuff, technology is technology. Things can always go wrong, and the event organizers that we see that are the strongest are the ones that just anticipate that, and they kind of build that into their assumption. You might have a speaker that doesn't know how to work Zoom. You might have someone's house might lose power, so they aren't able to access it. There are a whole bunch of things that might happen, and that's not necessarily something that you need to then be worrying about. It's just making sure that you're not letting it get to you, and that's I think where people get a little bit worried. But there's certainly a lot of differences, a lot of opportunities out there for different types of experiences, different ways of engaging with your audience in the session. Happy to talk through that. It's also just important to remember that if you're coming from the world of physical training or in-person training or conferences, don't worry about the fact that, well, you know, it's just not as good as an in-person event. Of course it isn't. You know, there are differences, and your job as an event organizer or a trainer isn't to try and convince everybody that the experience that they're going into is even better than the in-person event. There's probably a reason why you wanted it to be an in-person event, and the fact that isn't the case anymore, you know, that shouldn't be like a reason for you to get pessimistic about still being able to deliver the value. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. So on that note, you've seen effective communication about going virtual and ineffective communication. And you shared a little bit about that right now. What are you seeing those who adapt their in-person conference to a virtual conference? How are they communicating it? And what is that mindset that's making it more effective?
So I think a big difference between the ones that I wouldn't say maybe they're getting flustered by it or they're really, really worried about it. Maybe they're dwelling a bit more on their perfectionist tendencies, versus the ones that seem to be doing super well, is a willingness to not be sure of an answer when communicating with stakeholders. So I guess that there are two parts of this. There's one is stakeholders and communication, and then one is the attendee communication, the people who are participants. Attendee communication, as soon as you know what's going to happen. So if you know that you're going to cancel the event, but you don't know, and you're going to make it virtual, but you don't know how you're going to make it virtual, that doesn't mean that you need all of everything else sorted out in order to be very clear and send a message to your attendees and say, hey, by the way, everyone, don't travel. Obviously, this probably isn't an issue anymore, but hey, everyone, we're not running the event. However, we're doing a virtual version. More details will be made available shortly. Even if you don't have anything set up, you at least are able to provide that kind of clear communication. Try not to worry about overburdening or trying to overcomplicate things when you don't need to. On the stakeholder side, we see The people who who start communicating with their stakeholders early and aren't afraid to say stuff like, right now, this is our position. It could change. We don't know about this. We don't know about that. We don't know about another thing. I think the temptation is you are the event planner, so you're supposed to have all the answers. But if you can get over that and start to have open and regular communications with your stakeholders, with your sponsors, and all of that, and all those people, you'll find that it's much easier for you to be like, yep, this is exactly how we're thinking. I'm being open, being honest, and you're going to be coming along for this ride with me because my discovery is your discovery. So if that's your mindset and that's your approach, not being afraid to be open, this is the perfect time to flex those muscles, just because we're in such a weird situation. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I think probably the theme of almost every talk we've had during this summit is around communication and
Yep.
and communicating more, not less, and communicating with compassion and authenticity. And that's what I just heard. I think it is. If we're having to adjust plans, then we have to be real that it's going to be inconvenient. There are going to be errors or mistakes. It won't be perfect, but we're going to do the best we can. Thank you for your patience. We'll make sure we communicate to you.
And making sure that that's regular. So like one thing that we suggest is, especially people who are dealing with sponsors. Sponsors are, empathy is super important in everything that you do, obviously. And as event organizers, you probably have a little bit more empathy than most. But the only person that you don't have empathy for is usually yourself, right? But at the same time, if you can, as much as possible, what are sponsors going through right now? What are exhibitors going through right now? What are your stakeholders going through right now? Most of the time, they're freaking out. They're just worried. They don't really know what's going on. They're worried about their business. They're worried about surviving. So understand that emotional reactions to things that you're gonna put out there are, try and excuse that a little bit and try and just have some empathy for their situation. But at the same time, if you can create regular, expected forms of communication, so please, I would encourage you to do that. So if you're saying, hey, we're going to start having a weekly conference call about the update, and we're going to provide you updates every week in this format, start doing that and stick with it. Even though they might get uncertainty in terms of what is happening, they will get certainty in that they know that you're on the case and they know that you're going to be in touch with them. You might not be able to give them back their money. You might not be able to make all their dreams come true. That's okay. But what you're not doing is trying to send mixed signals. And I think that's super important.
That's well said. Well said. We have a couple of questions I want to run past you. One is specifically about all of the publicity that Zoom is getting around not being secure. What's your experience? What's your take on that as a part of utilizing it for a conference like this?
Sure. So Zoom is one of the platforms that we integrate with. We aren't owned by Zoom. We don't have an affiliation with them. You're using HeySummit and Zoom. You could be using HeySummit and something else, right? So from my perspective, it's just as a Zoom user and as a company that works with them as an integration. I've been super disappointed in the way the media has taken a look at Zoom, and I encourage anybody who is worried about the security to look very, very closely at what they're actually saying. I have to say I wasn't big into thinking that journalists could make these kinds of mistakes, but these are relatively basic things that very well-known news organizations are just missing. We haven't seen any evidence that there is any security issue with Zoom. Zoom is something that has been used for years in the enterprise space, in the B2B space. And I think right now, a lot of people are starting to use it for home things, for calling the grandparents and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But if you remember, Zoom is a business tool. That means it is eminently customizable. And just because your settings are of a certain way, it might mean that you allow people in when you might not have thought that it would have been as easy for them to get in. My takeaway is I don't see any problem with Zoom security. I think it's just because so many people aren't used to using it that they misconfigure it, or they don't understand what the configurations are. I certainly have no hesitancy using it, and I'm just really disappointed that the media don't ask like basic questions, which is a real shame. So anyway, no issue with Zoom. Love it.
Yeah, and we did our own research because we're like, okay, if that report is accurate, we may need to switch gears and use a different, couple HeySummit with, Big Marker or something else. And so we did figured out the same thing, that there's really not the security issue that is being claimed, and security issues that are related to our clients. Their IT department can easily help them click the little setting box to make it secure.
Yeah, the ways in which Zoom is, even though it looks like a relatively straightforward tool for maybe everybody who's using it right now, there's a lot of advanced settings that you can make. So whether it's Zoom, GoToWebinar, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, all of these tools have settings that can make it just like Zoom in all of the examples that they're saying. Part of Zoom's appeal is you can generate a link and invite anybody to join with that link if you set your room as open. So if you do that and send the link out and someone unexpected jumps in, that's why you set it that way, right? That doesn't mean that it's not secure. And so yeah, I wouldn't really worry. I think a lot of people just have never heard of Zoom before, and maybe people like you and I are a bit surprised about that, just because I think I've used Zoom for, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years. Like it's been around
before it was easy to use.
Exactly. So yeah, I really would encourage people not to worry about that stuff very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Share with me a little bit about the best practice of managing a virtual room. If in fact you're allowing folks to come on, and if it's a training event where you need people to interact, or a meeting that you want folks to engage and to have their video on, etc., versus a situation like this where we have folks that are chatting with us in the chat box, but it's you and I. So there's not people talking all over each other. We don't have to worry about managing the effectiveness of the meeting. What is your advice for folks who want to go virtual, but also maybe don't have the chops to understand that this could get out of hand pretty quick if you have, too many videos and yappers?
Yeah. So I think Zoom's capacity, so just in terms of like simultaneous people on the screen. So Zoom, as an example, has a meetings and a webinar. We are in the webinar right now, but you could do the meeting. I think they have like a capacity of 49 videos on a screen at any one time. And after that, they have more. It's just you have to go to a different page. So running a meeting with 49 people on is a little bit, you're asking for trouble. We can get into Zoom if you'd like, but from a Zoom perspective, you can create settings for your meetings before they start. So one is to automatically deactivate everybody's microphone. So you can set it so that someone has to raise their hand, and then the owner allows someone to talk. The other thing that you could encourage people to do, Zoom has a setting where you can make your space bar a talk button. So then I would be on mute unless I press and held my space bar, and then you'd be able to hear me. And then if I let go, I'd be muted again. Like if you're in a in-person event, you see sometimes people have that. If you're talking about like training with Zoom, you have breakout rooms that you can use. So you can send people away and then bring them back. But if you're talking about other tools, if you're like looking for interesting other tools that allow you to do some unique things, I think Remo is an interesting one. Remo or AirMeet. These are more, they come from the networking side of things. Like that's how they started. So Remo, for example, and both Remo and AirMeet, they're very similar. You have like a room with tables, and you have a little avatar. And if Anissa is on one room, on one table, and then I put my face on that table, both of our cameras turn on. But there can only be 4 people or 5 people, whatever, at a specific table. But then the organizer can bring everyone together to watch something in the theater, right? Something together, and then distribute you back to your tables. So like they're fun tools like that. There's another one that I think probably you won't be able to use yet called Hop-In. That's another
someone that was just asking about that.
Yeah. So Hop-In is kind of a mixture between Remo, that kind of stuff, and Zoom. So they're focused on making sure that attendees can talk to each other in the Zoom, in like a Zoom type session. But they're pretty early on, and I know that they've opened themselves up for certain live events. But check back in a few months, and they're probably going to be pushing a lot more, smaller type of events as well. We know them; they're great folks as well. Very early as well.
Excellent. So my takeaway from that is determine how you want to interact with your people. If this is a large audience conference, that's going to be a very different setting than a small room or even a room of 50, say, for example.
I'd also think of your attendee journey, right? And we call it attendee mechanics, especially when you're thinking of it in an in-person event, and map those out. Just map it out on a piece of paper. An attendee comes to the conference to attend a masterclass. Why? Because they want to learn a skill. Okay, so usually they come, they listen, they don't ask questions. They're just there to listen. An attendee comes to a conference to meet with exhibitors. Why? Because they want to do business deals, or they specifically want to seek out a particular, a person. And map each of those things. Because usually if you're running a conference or a training, you aren't just using one format. You're using multiple formats. You might have a talk at the beginning, then you're going to separate everybody out in groups. There's going to be some whiteboarding sessions. There's going to be some other sessions. And so just because you're using multiple formats in real life doesn't mean that you should be stuck to using one format virtually, right? And then take those attendee mechanics and map them to the formats, and then look and see which of those formats are easy to keep if you're putting it virtual, need to be tweaked. So they need to be changed in some way, or the format is just doesn't work virtually, and it's maybe something that needs to be dumped, or you just need to find an alternative. Mapping them out in those ways, I think, really helps you feel a lot more confident about, okay, what tools do I actually need, or which ones I could use, but actually I don't really need to. If I just make a few tweaks, I can get by. But just going methodically through the process like that is super helpful.
So that will help organizers to think through. If they were having a big conference, oftentimes it starts with a keynote where 10,000 people are in the room, or whatever that number is, and then there's breakout sessions, and the breakout session experience can be much more interactive depending on how many people are there, and that is an entirely different setup, say a meeting virtually, versus the webinar like what we're doing, where people can still interact, they can still ask questions and add pieces to the chat, but the technology means that our real focus is on that keynote, is on that speaker.
Absolutely, and you shouldn't be afraid to mix and match. If your conference has a networking session and you're going to use Remo for that, why not? Why not use Remo for a networking session and Zoom for a masterclass or a keynote? And I think people should be open to trying new things. At the same time, you should be making sure that you keep everything as simple as possible, especially your first time, right?
Yeah. And in relationship to HeySummit will allow you to mix and match your different platforms. Is that right?
Sure. Of course. So yeah. What we do is we're the organizational and marketing and kind of planning framework, and then we plug into different webinar platforms, live streaming platforms, or pre-recorded sessions. So you can run a Zoom session for this one, for what we're doing right now, and then a Remo session for the next talk, or a Big Marker session for the one after that, or YouTube Live, or what have you.
However you want to do it.
Yeah.
So I know that before we get too far along, you have put together a special, an exclusive offer sort of, that is for folks, and that allows folks to experience HeySummit, especially right now in response to COVID-19. Will you share with our folks, how they can experience HeySummit and what you've put together?
Sure, absolutely. So basically, anybody who has been affected by the coronavirus and who are needing to either to move like an event online, we're giving 75% off any of our plans for the rest of the year. And if you're a charity, we have a 75% off for life plan, and we're also able to provide like one free event like that lasts for life. We also have a services component if people need that. We are a platform, but sometimes people need a little bit of help. And so anybody who is affected by coronavirus, we're knocking off about $1,000 for that, for whatever it is that you're needing from a services side. So yeah, I mean, we've also created an event guide for event organizers who are just wanting to maybe move virtual. You can find that at coronaeventguide.com. And that kind of goes through just again, talking about some of the stuff that I'm talking about, just how the mindset of how you go through and not cut up, but like segment your event, map your value chain, and then then consider different options. But yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure we got that early enough to where folks could take advantage of it. So one of the things I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about is how to avoid failures. We've talked about the communication piece. We've talked about understanding the technology, and there may be more about that. But how do we as organizers avoid the pitfalls that people experience when they go virtual versus in person?
Test. and I know it sounds silly. But the number of people who don't realize that they've configured something a certain way, or they're just assuming that that Zoom will work, but they've set it so that it has a password on it on the room. There are a lot of these things that end up happening, and what ends up happening is a situation where someone might then be having a problem. And then as an event organizer, you're suddenly thinking, ooh, the technology is not working. What's going on? And then emotions spiral, right? And you get really, really worried. Certainly what I would say, regardless of what platforms you use for the event that you're planning, go through at any point at which there is a touch point to an attendee, you need to test that touch point. Mm-hmm. So that's not only a technology test, but it's also a communication test. So let's say you've decided to cancel your event, and you then are looking at the communications plan with for your attendees. You need to kind of get inside your attendees' head and go through each step of that, in their shoes. How are you going to tell them that it's canceled? How are they going to be notified about how to access the new conference? How do they log in? Are they going to be imported? Are they going to have to create a new account on somewhere? Are they going to have to create a password? Or do they not do that? What are the pages that they go to if they're having any problems that will always get them around there? Are they going to have to install anything? It's not necessarily that you need to answer these questions in a particular way. You just need to know the answers to them all. And I think oftentimes people just assume that's I don't know, assume that that's not necessary, that it's just really like simple or automatic. And a lot of people kind of maybe complain that Zoom is not intuitive, or Skype is not intuitive, or what have you is not intuitive. And the answer is that the reason why is that intuition is in the eye of the beholder in a way, right? So understanding that, I can't tell you the number of times that people have gotten in touch and say, I don't know how to register. And there's a big button in front of their screen that just says register. And if you say, well, if you click that, oh, I didn't realize that's what it meant. You're always going to have examples like that. And so it's not about you testing it necessarily so it can work. It's so that you can get inside the mind of the attendee, and you know exactly what they're facing. And you know when someone is reporting something, is that actually hang on, no, it shouldn't be doing that, or actually, it's just a way that you've been using it. That it sounds simple. Go through the process. You'll be so much more comfortable with whatever it is that you're using.
Well, and I also can speak from experience in doing that. I also figured out things I didn't know I needed to know.
Yeah, exactly.
So including, when will the communication go out? How does it go out? How do I revise that messaging based on something else I said? We have had a shift. We've had a change. How do I go back and revise that messaging, make sure that the right folks have been informed, the speakers know what. So unless we test. You don't know all of those little nuances about how to respond and adapt. And today it's all about adaption.
Very true. And I mean, we've been talking about the attendees, but if you're talking about speakers as well, that's just as important. If you're running a completely live event, for example, and you're not doing anything pre-recorded, then the number of connections that need to work multiply. Your connection needs to work, your attendees' connection needs to work, and your speaker's connection needs to work. So sometimes what people do is they do a practice session with each of their speakers. And literally, it's just, let's say you're going on Zoom, you just schedule a time, ideally make the time the exact same time of day as you are going to be running the event if you can. So if someone's going on at 5 p.m., schedule their test for a day or two earlier at 5 p.m. If it's a weekday, schedule it on a weekday. And 5-minute call, just making sure, most likely they'll have to install Zoom. They'll have to, they might have some steps, but then you're in, you figure that out. It doesn't need to take much longer than that. So little things like that, just going through both your attendees and your speakers' journeys, it just makes you feel so much more in control of the situation, even though a lot of the stuff is, it's not super complicated. It's just about you feeling confident.
Yep, I would agree. And from an administrator's perspective, knowing where the buttons exist and knowing what I can do within the technology, as well as what my speakers are going to expect, has brought forth a whole different level of confidence. And that is, in fact, one of the hurdles that I think our folks are going to experience with going virtual.
Absolutely. Confidence is something that you never have enough of, but you need some to get started, right? And so I think it's very easy for us all to be perfectionists and imposters, right? And imposter syndrome is real. But at the same time, the people who do the best, if you're talking about like, how can I be best, most likely failed several times. Yeah. So if you haven't failed several times, then you're not on that route yet.
Hard enough. That's right. Well, I want to read to you what George shared with us. Thanks, Robin and Isa. I've been on 2 conferences that went virtual to fulfill utilizing WorkCast and Issuer Direct. One was in the shipping transportation, and the other was a small cap equities conference with one-on-one meetings being conference call. The calls would shut down after 20 minutes automatically. He has purchased HeySummit before this COVID-19 happened, and before work from home, but hasn't utilized it. So he says he can definitely see himself using the platform in an effective way. What do people do? Technology is technology. There's going to be, no matter how great it is on an everyday basis, we're going to have 20-minute shutdowns at times. What is your advice for getting folks back on, bouncing in the middle of a tech crash?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know if what George is saying is that it was intended to shut down after 20 minutes automatically, because I know that some people actually set them up that way, so that like, hey, we're going to have a one-to-one call, but you only have 20 minutes.
So get over it if you got something else to say.
Exactly. But no. If something shuts down, and you're the event organizer, right? First off, it can affect anyone. I think I forget the company that was doing it. They were doing a pretty large. It wasn't using Zoom. I think it was using. Don't quote me on it. I think it was something like Cisco or a company that owned a video conferencing platform, and their feed went out. A little bit embarrassing, but at the same time, it's okay. It happens. It's all right. It's technology, and I think that the one event organizer that we saw who had some problems with Zoom, I think that they had too many people on. They were just too popular, and so some people weren't able to make it, so it didn't work for them. Saying like, "Hey, sorry, we were just way too popular than we thought we were, and we crashed the system. Sorry about that." Those kind of things. I think yes, it's frustrating in the moment for people, but at the same time, there are ways that you can salvage that and quickly make a new session. Or if you're an event organizer, maybe have some text ready to go. Just if there's a problem with any talk, you just know that you can just send it out and say, hey, looks like we're experiencing some technical difficulties. It wouldn't be a virtual summit without technical difficulties. Right now, people are having trouble accessing this talk. We're investigating, let you know when we have something. Even something as simple as that, I mean, and it's because the speaker house lost power, right? Doesn't really matter. That's the one thing I wouldn't like stress about it too much. The other thing is obviously you could familiarize yourself with some of the backup options that some of these platforms have. So like Zoom, for example, you can dial in on a phone. Yep. For your audio. So if you're really, really paranoid or worried about the connection, also take your phone and dial in on the number and just put it on mute. And so then that means if something goes wrong, you still have your phone as a backup. Everyone can still access it. So little things like that you can go through and try out. Again, test.
Little important tips is what you're sharing. Tell me a little bit about, I want to hear too about how HR, for example, can use a virtual setting to push out training or onboarding. And I know that you and your entire team are virtual. Is that right?
We are. Yeah, we're fully remote. Yep.
Yeah. So I'd love to also hear, how do you use, the virtual remote tools for effectively motivating and engaging and training and onboarding your team?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, I guess I'd start by just prefacing that by, we are a startup, and startups, I know that some of the things that we do, some HR professionals out there might think, oh, we wouldn't be able to do that. It's like, it's such a big organization. We wouldn't be able to, we just don't work that way. So just keep that in mind. But like, I think the mentality might be helpful, and some of the things that we do might be helpful. So we are a fully remote team. We have team members in Scotland and England, in the Caribbean, in Canada, in California, in the Philippines. So we're all over the world, and we all work at different hours. So I think a lot of companies, when they start thinking about hiring remote or flexible working, they get really, really worried that like people won't work. That seems to be the fundamental thing. And usually, yes, it's masked by other other excuses or feelings or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's about trust. And you think that just because someone isn't sitting at their desk, they must not be working. And I certainly would encourage people to radically rethink that. The bigger problem that we have is that people work too much. And so a lot of the ways in which we work, these are passionate people. They love their flexibility, but they don't take advantage of it. And so from a manager's perspective, that's actually one of my big worries, that people end up working all the time. So making sure that your employees, if they're being remote, are confident and they're feeling empowered to turn off and to treat themselves as away from work. This kind of stuff is important, and I think a lot of people worry about the other side. I would encourage you to think about overworking as a problem, because burnout is far more common if you are a remote employee. And it's not because the company necessarily works you to death. It's more just you want to do a good job, and you're here and you're already on the computer. So it's 10 p.m. Why not? Oh, I can just reply to this email. We in terms of like tools, so we live and work on Slack. Some people, we love Slack, and Slack or Microsoft Teams, Twist. There are some other ones out there. And basically, these are like hybrids between like instant messaging, company intranet, and I guess if you want to call it like a replacement for internal email. And Slack is great because of a couple things. One, it allows you to message people without clogging up people's inbox. We don't use email at all internally. We only use it externally. But it does ping a lot. So you need to be confident in having controls and making sure that you can turn those off. It's also great for onboarding, because Slack or Microsoft Teams or what have you, they usually are organized in channels that are about projects or about subjects or lots of different other things. When you bring on a new team member, instead of on email, you might have to find a whole bunch of files and like email it to them and say, hey, can you read up on these? Instead, on Slack, we just add them to a channel and we say, hey, go back 2 weeks and read and you can see what we've done. So that kind of group awareness is really nice. The other thing that we do for new team members, like we brought on two new team members yesterday, and so we have we use an app called Slite, Slite. That's like our internal like shared notes. Any kind of shared documentation that's internal is on Slite. So like Slack, you can go back and you can see whatever everybody's been writing, all of the how-tos and all that kind of stuff. So everybody gets an onboarding sheet, and it has their checklist of things that they have to do. And it's a bit fun. We throw in lots of emojis, but we have one section of it called the Guide to Me. And so if you want, you can look it up. It's based off of the user manual, writing a user manual. And this is basically for a new employee to fill out, like, what's their style like? What's their communication style like how best to communicate with them? What do they not have patience for? How best to help them? So with this, we try and make sure that people feel okay to be vulnerable. They feel like they're okay being their authentic self, and they're also okay with telling you exactly what kind of communication methods they prefer. So some people might say, I really like everything written down on text because it takes me a while to think through what it is that I'm hearing. So if we're on a call and I'm agreeing to stuff, I get overwhelmed. That might not be something that people feel comfortable saying, especially if they're new. But if we are telegraphing that as best practice and a good good culture, that's super important. I think that has a big effect. The last thing that I'll say is so we also use Zoom every day, we try and strike the balance between too many meetings and no contact. If you're fully asynchronous, you might like, Anissa, if we were working, we might have a call on Monday and then we won't see each other until the next Monday. I don't really like that. Our team doesn't work that way. We have one call every day where everybody hops on all around the world. It's about 15 minutes long, and it starts off with a trivia question. So we go round robin, someone asks a trivia question, then we have the whole call to think about it. Everybody goes around and just says, what are they working on? What are the challenges that they're coming up against? What are they going to be working on for the next call? So it's stand-up. It's called a stand-up. It's pretty basic. And at the end, we all answer the trivia question, see who got it right. And that's it. Like, that's it. Just an opportunity for everybody to check in, see each other's faces, remember that we're all humans, and ask for help when they need to. And then I guess the final thing is each of our team members has one-to-ones with other team members, just so that we can, like, and these one-to-ones are not about work. It's just what's going on in your life, what's going on in my life. It's just a chance for you to connect. So that was a kind of whirlwind about how we operate. Hopefully that was helpful.
I think it was very helpful. We've been running our team virtually for 20 something years now. And the tools that were available to us then are completely different. And so every tool that you mentioned for the most part, I wasn't familiar with Slite, so I'm going to check that one out. But one last question. I know that virtual conferences are also a really great way to onboard your team, to have organizations create from their executives, from their subject matter experts, and communicate to their employees, here's where we are, here's where we're headed, and even have their town halls, so to speak. What has been your experience with that, or what are you seeing that's interesting that people and companies are doing that way?
So I think the most interesting one that I've seen recently is this is quite a large company, and they are doing an internal diversity summit. So it's not so much it's not so much for onboarding. It is though about encouraging like internal excellence and highlighting and recognizing internal excellence, but also providing training. So they've been doing that virtually to, I think, great effect, because it has senior leadership involved. You're able to talk about the company, you're able to provide some training, and it's a focused, targeted subject. Some tech companies do this internally, and they have little contests as part of it as well. So like, you might have a week where we're focusing on this issue, and every part of the company can go into teams and we're going to learn about the issue during the week, but also you're going to go off and try and solve a problem or create a proposal. And then we're going to have like a little contest, and everyone's going to pitch their solution, and we're going to talk about it. And the top set of people are going to then, go on to senior management to pitch or to talk through about what might be feasible. These types of events they're really great at both encouraging openness, encouraging curiosity, but also allowing the senior leadership, depending on the size of your organization, senior leadership, the distance between senior leadership and entry level might be very, really, really vast. Ways in which you can do that is they are positive. And from a virtual element, that's one of the few times where virtual connections might actually be more authentic than in-person connections. Because if you're talking about XYZ large company and you're doing a symposium for the whole company, your entry-level person isn't going to be able to get up close and personal with the CEO. But if you're doing it online, you can construct it, and you can gatekeep it. You can make it so that every new entrant actually gets 10 minutes with the CEO. Why not? You have the space. And imagine the effect that will have not only on the entry level person, but also on the other team, knowing that, hey, the people we hire get FaceTime with the CEO their first week, and you can just do that virtually in a much easier way than in person. So,
I love it.
Don't know
You're speaking to something I'm quite passionate about. One of the biggest challenges that organizations have is really communicating their mission and vision and cascading that through the organization. And one of the reasons is because folks don't have access to even a simple conversation or to understand the passion behind the founder's vision or the CEO's vision. And so what you just shared is exactly, we're talking 10 minutes of their time, group meeting, welcome, what questions do you have for me, small town hall virtually is an easy way to close that gap.
And I think there's also a distinction between communication and buy-in.
Yep.
And I think a lot of time people think that they need a megaphone, and what they need is they need the tin can and the string, right?
Yep.
And I think that, like, so in development, we have a process that when we're looking at features, we don't actually say, right, this week you're all working on this. We have a list of things that we know need to be done, and then we ask the support team, like, what's pissing off our customers the most? Is there anything that really, really kind of is affecting? Then we go to the engineering team. We say, which of these, which do you think we should be working on? And that's how we plan all of our development. It's not kind of a top down in that way. It's focusing the conversation. But if people who are working on whatever it is that you're working on are the ones making the decisions to work on that thing, that buy-in is that's how you develop culture. Culture can't be created. Culture has to be fostered. And so I think taking that approach to what have you, to engaging with new hires, they're just little tweaks that allow people to feel bought into the mission rather than being lectured to, like, oh, here are our pillars and here are our whatevers. Doesn't really matter.
I agree 1,000%. So that's, I think, been very insightful. I want to run two quick questions past you. What do you think about Teams? And then the other is, what sort of internet connection do you think we need? I have 100 UP, 100 down, or 100 up, 100 down in speed, but at times my screen freezes. Do your computers need a certain amount of RAM, CPU? Do you have tech advice?
Are you talking about Microsoft Teams? Maybe talking about?
Yeah.
So I've never used Microsoft Teams. So I'll let you, as a secret, my wife works for Slack. So contractually, we are not allowed to use anything else.
Right.
But I know that Microsoft Teams was created as a competitor to Slack. So I know that they're very similar. And I know a lot of people who use Microsoft Teams. I've been on one of their calls. Their calling is really nice. And I think with whether it's Slack or Microsoft Teams, they are very customizable to you as a user. Take some time, read up on a couple of ways that you can customize it so that you're not getting pinged all the time, that you can mute different things, mute different channels, or maybe just get notified for certain things. But I love the way in which you can work with Slack or with Microsoft Teams. A lot of schools have started to use Microsoft Teams as well to just manage their students. So it's a great piece of kit. Obviously, it's not as good as Slack.
Where's the one?
Exactly.
You may not even get dinner for mentioning it.
Well, I'm the one who makes the dinner, so I'm okay. But the other thing about internet speeds. There are a couple things to keep in mind. One, what is the tool that you're using? Two, where is the person that you're speaking with? I know that people don't think of that, but like if you and I are both one continent apart, so there's probably not going to be that much latency. If I was in Indonesia, there would be more latency. So it's possible that just the call might be slightly delayed. That still happens. I think people might think that doesn't happen, but it does happen. But you're 100 up, 100 down. I don't know if that's megs or gigs or what have you. But as long as it's not kilobits, which I doubt, that's a very fast speed, very fast connection. Your computer might also just have a lot of things running. And then sometimes, depending on the software that you're using, it can be a resource hog. So every once in a while, these things, do have a moment. But yeah, no, Zoom particularly is incredibly good for low bandwidth situations. I think it's the best one out there so far. I think Teams is not bad, but some of the others that are a bit newer, it's just that they're you'll notice that like if you resize this screen, if anybody who's watching just takes and resizes the screen for a split second, Anissa and my video might go pixelated for a second. And that's because Zoom is looking at how big your screen is and optimizing the connection for that screen. So it's doing a lot of work to try and make sure that you can see that. So I don't know if that helps.
But I'll tell you what, it does help. That's where the insecurity comes from, because this whole lockdown thing has my hair looking like I'm stuck in a 90s sitcom. So
well, look at mine. I look like I'm wearing a football helmet right now.
Fantastic. Well, this has been incredibly helpful. Tell folks again how they can get a hold of you, and remind folks how to take advantage of the HeySummit special offer.
Sure. So you can write to me at rob@heysummit.com, and you can access our guide that we created by going to coronaeventguide.com. Our website is heysummit.com, and if you do, you'll see a banner about coronavirus, and you'll see an information about that as an offer, like a way that we can help. So feel free to click on that and get in touch with you if you have any questions.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing your time with us. If TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions can support you in any of your current needs related to training or executive or enterprise outplacement services, do reach out to me, Anissa, at TurnKeyCoachingSolutions.com. And thank you so much, Rob. This has been fantastic.
No worries. Thanks, Anissa.
All right. Have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.